There we are. It is May 2nd, 1999. So I'll put a little bit of framework kind of going into here. Blake is out there flying. What ended up happening overall is there's a strike package going into Oberva Airfield, and it's a pretty significant strike night, if you will. And what ends up happening, I'll let Blake tell the actual story, but I know what he probably would leave out is the fact that this mission Blake was awarded the Silver Star. So you were awarded a Silver Star for this mission. You and your Weasel package ended up killing destroying multiple SA3s in support of the strike package, and it was a successful strike into a very dense, high threat environment. So with that, Blake, kind of talk to us what led to that mission, the mission planning, and then overall just what happened in as much detail as you want to get into.
Yeah, you bet. So that's an interesting time of the war because, typically you start getting a little complacent because we've been doing this now for 6 weeks. We are now into the phase of the war when we were talking about before where we were flowing with them. Now we're doing the back and forth kill box type of missions, if you will. So we're supporting 2 different packages, an A package and a C package. And then we've got buddies that are covering the B and the D package. So we're multiple engagements like that. So it's nighttime, full moon. Fingers had just been shot down. So everybody's up and running, looking to take another shot, trying to get down some NATO aircraft. And we flow into the area just before the strike package. The first strike package, NATO package, had some Brit Tornadoes. I think there were Canadian F-18s in there, and a couple others, and they were going to take out military targets in the area around the airfield. So we set up our package initially as counter-rotating, just a standard rotating cap located in the same position, about 10 to 12 miles at the front of the cap from where we think the surface threats are, and we got a pretty good look down. The full moon was a problem because it was right behind us. So if you're looking at the airfield and we're capping here, the full moon's right behind us. So I should have picked that up in my mission planning. I didn't think about that until we got airborne. I was like, oh, that's not good. And so we're in the cap, and an SA-3 comes up, launches a salvo. I directed my number 3 guy, Gus, to engage him. And when that happened, Gus actually became the engaged fighter. So he immediately went into his glib. His wingman, as you remember, is flying a radar trail with no NVGs, no lights. So he follows them to give them mutual support. So there's no harms available to turn and put on the sight. So on that first one, I put the max G I could on the aircraft, turned it around, and laid a harm down as quick as I could into that area. And I don't know if that one actually hit. It definitely forced them to shut down. So because we didn't see an explosion, we saw the missile come up. It did not explode like we expected it would at our altitude. And so I said, hey, this is probably not the best place for us to be capping. So we kind of reformed everybody, figured out we're on the Victor radio. Hey, I'm over here at altitude, blah, blah, blah. And we quickly repositioned ourselves away from the moon being behind us. And then we got repositioned for the second wave of those strikers coming in. Same thing, about a minute from the strikers coming in, we're getting really serious about what's out there. And we get engaged again by I don't know if it's the same site, but a site that was very close. I laid down a harm, my remaining harm. I shot that. At the time, our tactic was to try and unload the wingman's aircraft first. Let them shoot their harms first because they were task saturated just trying to station keep.
Absolutely.
So in the case of this type of scenario where the flight lead had the best SA because I'm actually looking out and listening to what's going on, I was in a better position. So I'm basically Winchester on my harms now. The one thing that we pulled out of this, well, there's a couple lessons, was look at where the AAA is, because as soon as you start reacting and as soon as you shoot that harm, everybody in the world knows where you are. Right. There's a big plume. So, we always talk about safe escape maneuvers when you're dropping bombs. Same thing when you're shooting the air-to-air weapons or air-to-surface weapons. Launch that harm, get away from that site as quickly as from that launch point, and then reposition yourself. So that was a big lesson. We learned that one over and over. It seemed like every night was, holy crap, every time I shot, all the AAA came up. AAA didn't have that high of altitude, but if you're on the downside of your glib maneuver, you're now getting in that area where you could theoretically be hit by the Golden BB. So that was that. The thing I was most happy about was all my guys stayed in position. They all kept sensors downrange when we needed them to. They repositioned without all those extra sensors on. We're getting longer days. And this was a lesson I think the A-10s also ran into, is nautical twilight is not the same as twilight when you're at altitude. So we always looked at sunrise and said, hey, we want to be out of the bad guy area at sunrise. But we were looking at sunrise based on the surface of the Earth not being at 25,000 feet. So even though it's dark on the ground, they can still see us up there because we're starting to catch twilight at 20,000 feet. That makes sense? Yeah, that was a huge lesson learned. You could have your lights off all day long, but all it takes is for the guy to look up and see you, plain as day.
Yeah, That's incredibly interesting, because another thing that is I feel is getting lost as we get farther and farther away from conflicts that we have to think about these things. And as
Yeah.
we get farther away from people who have actually been there, like yourself, like I'm incredibly proud to wear a weasel patch. I've never done it in combat. I'd like readily admit that. And so kind of when I'm teaching weaseling is from guys like yourself that have taught me how to do it. And then also kind of more from my A10 background is tactical weather. And so
Right.
it's like, it's okay. That was something in the A10 that was briefed every single day. Why did we brief that? Because I was like, okay, I want to know if I can actually see this tank at what range because of transmissivity and humidity and all these different things, and sun angle and how long are the shadows, all these different things. But then, so then when I became into the weasel world, I was just like, okay, all those same things apply. But we're just starting to lose some of those things. It's like, okay, we're going to go out in the dead of night. We're going to go out here. But we forget that if I fly literally through the moon, I'm now the bat signal as I'm kind of going in, and you don't even think about that. And then now when you guys are kind of thinking about this as like the Vietnam stats, if you will, is 88% of shoot downs via AAA. Is were you guys also attempting to target like AAA radars, or if you could actually see the guns, like would you go drop bombs on those guns, or was that not like didn't have the weapons? It was like avoid AAA, kill the SAMs. Was that kind of your game?
Yeah, stay above the AAA if you could. I think the CGs might have had a tertiary target. Like if they're hunting a SAM and they saw a AAA piece nearby, they could take it. If they could identify. But it was not an attempt to try and take out a AAA. It was just too hard to target.
All works. Yeah, no, that's valid. Because also, I mean, you're going to spend all day long killing the density of AAA, specifically in a place that wants to be defended around an airfield. So
Right.
that's kind of what a lot of people are kind of talking about. I sorry, it just jumped in my head. My brain works like a squirrel sometimes, or sees squirrels at times. But with Maverick shooting at giraffes is hilarious.
Crazy.
Because when I was going to Osan, I was just finished up in my time in the A10, because of course that airplane's going away forever. And and I had to go through the Maverick upgrade. It was like I had to go learn, and I was just like, "What do you mean Maverick upgrade?" Like, this is just a weapon. This is actually the bread and butter weapon. I was like, with the draft, I was like, could have asked the A10 guys to shoot drafts for you. I'm sure they would have enjoyed that.
Oh,
but
they would have been happy to.
Absolutely. So now, like, obviously hearing these weasel stories and like going out and doing it, the theme that has come through, and I asked this question, it was offered up by Curly and Lucky and some of these guys, but you're actively getting shot at. Fingers had just gotten shot down by an SA-6. When you guys are actively getting shot at, what, if you can harken back to this, like what is going through your mind when that is happening? Because you said what you were most proud of is like your guys stayed where they were supposed to be. They executed the tactics. They repositioned. They employed weapons. They kept sensors down track. They supported the strike package. Like the weasel standard every single day when we go out to train to this. So even in an environment where you're like, oh man, these things have demo pro that they can shoot down an F-16. We are in this very chaotic environment. Was it just like training? Did you do anything different that you hadn't done 40, 50, 60, 70, 100 times at weapons school or in training? Or was that going through your mind, or like what was going through Blink's mind when this is occurring, of like what radio calls did you make? And did it look like training, or was it wholly different?
I would say it was different for a couple of reasons. Is you can simulate all you want, but until something's actually shot at you, you will never get that pucker factor, right? So there's definitely the, guys always talk about when you eject, you have this temporal distortion where everything kind of slows down. I felt that in the cockpit. I think a lot of guys I talked to had those same things, air-to-air engagements. The sea models are shooting down. They're getting temporal distortion as they can visualize everything that happened. So temporal distortion definitely kicked in. The next thing is, I don't know if I've ever told anybody this, so maybe this is news. When I fenced in, breaking news. When I fenced in, I had not gone to ARM. So I was still in a simulate mode. So I got everything locked up and pushed the pickle button. Nothing happened. I'm like, holy crap, I got a hang fire. And then for some reason, I went over and immediately went to ARM, handed off again and shot. So, and this is why I say you get complacent, as you start doing these things, you start getting complacent. The checklist mentality has got to be there, man. You got to run through the fence check. Everything you do has got to be muscle memory.
Yeah.
So you don't forget the basics, right? So it didn't take long, but it's just enough for you to go, oh, what's going on? It kind of slows you down a little bit. So yeah, I would say that's probably the main thing.
Yeah.